I want a man who makes other women jealous, not someone who makes them comfortable, my girlfriend said during an argument before storming out of my apartment. I let her go without stopping her. Months later, she learned why so many women suddenly wanted my time. I want a man who makes other women jealous, not someone who makes them comfortable. She said it like it was obvious, like I should have already known. I stood there for a second, just processing the words, watching her grab her jacket off the back of the chair. She didn't look at me when she said it. That was the part that stayed with me. At the time, I thought she was talking about attraction. Months later, she'd learned she never understood it at all. She walked out at 9:47 on a Tuesday night. I remember because I checked my phone after the door closed, not to call her back, but because I needed something to do with my hands. The apartment felt exactly the same as it always did. That was the strange part. I expected to feel something collapse. Instead, everything was quiet. The kind of quiet that tells you something was already over before the door shut. I didn't chase her. I didn't text. I sat down on the couch, looked at the ceiling for a while, and then went to bed. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I'm 34. I work in project development for a mid-sized firm in Manhattan. I've been in the city for 9 years, long enough to stop being impressed by it and start actually living in it. Holly and I had been together for 2 years. She was 31, worked in marketing, had a laugh that could fill a room, and an Instagram following that she treated like a second job. We met through a mutual friend, moved fast in the beginning, then gradually started moving in different directions without either of us naming it. We never lived together, which I think made it easier for both of us to pretend things were fine longer than they were. The first time I noticed something was off, we were at a rooftop party in Williamsburg. A guy named Derek showed up late. I didn't know Derek. Holly did, apparently, from some networking event a few months back. He walked in wearing a watch that probably cost more than my monthly rent, loud in the way some men get loud when they want to be noticed. Holly tracked him across the room without moving her head. I clocked it immediately. He's always like that, she said, before I even asked. Like what? I said. Present, she said. Like people want to look at him. I let that sit for a moment. You want people to look at me like that? She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I just think it's attractive when a man commands attention. I nodded. I ignored that warning. Over the next few months, the comparisons got quieter but more frequent. A comment about a guy at the gym who apparently had an energy she couldn't explain. A remark about how her coworker's boyfriend always looked like he was going somewhere important. Small things, the kind that don't land as arguments but accumulate as pressure. My friend Scott pulled me aside once after a dinner we all had together. She's auditioning you, he said. For what? For a role you didn't know you were supposed to be playing. I told him he was being dramatic. He wasn't. That wasn't the last comparison. Holly had a complicated relationship with social media. Complicated in the sense that it wasn't complicated at all. It was her primary lens. If something didn't translate well to content, she struggled to assign it full value. Experiences needed to be photographed. Moments needed to be captioned. Relationships needed to be visible. She wasn't cruel about it. She wasn't performing inauthenticity. She had just spent so long measuring worth through visibility that she genuinely couldn't separate the two anymore. I understood that. What I didn't fully understand yet was how much it would eventually cost us. She started making small comments about the things I didn't post, about the events I turned down, about how I never seemed to want to be seen. You have a life worth showing, she said once. Why do you hide it? I didn't think of it as hiding. I still didn't understand what she really wanted. My mentor Dean once told me something I've thought about many times since. We were having lunch near his office in Midtown, a place he'd been going to for 20 years, where the staff knew his order and he never had to ask twice. He said, "The men who need the whole room to look at them are usually terrified no one will." I was 26 when he said it. I filed it somewhere and moved on. I didn't fully understand it until I was 34, sitting across from Holly at a dinner where she spent most of the night watching the table next to us instead of me. The argument that ended everything didn't start as an argument. It started as a conversation about a charity event. My colleague Madison was organizing a fundraiser for a youth education nonprofit she'd been building for 3 years. She'd asked if I'd come, help work the room a little, introduce her to a few contacts. I said yes without hesitating. When I mentioned it to Holly, she asked who else was going. I told her. She asked how I knew Madison. I told her. She went quiet in the particular way that meant she was constructing something. "You always find time for other people," she finally said. She's building something real, I said. It matters. It always matters when it's someone else. I looked at her. What does that mean? She put her phone down. That's when I knew the actual conversation was starting. She said she felt like I moved through life at a frequency she couldn't tune into. That I was always calm when she needed energy. That I was always steady when she needed electricity. She said she felt like she was in a relationship with someone who had already decided everything and left no room for fire. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I asked what she wanted me to do differently. She said she didn't know, which is the most honest thing anyone can say and also the most impossible thing to work with. The conversation quieted. She picked up her jacket. Then she said it. I want a man who makes other women jealous, not someone who makes them comfortable. And she walked out. I've replayed that line more times than I'd like to admit. Not out of hurt, out of curiosity, because underneath the insult was a belief system. Holly had decided that jealousy was evidence of value, that if other women wanted what she had, that confirmed she'd chosen correctly, that comfort, the ease other women felt around me, was proof of something missing. She had it exactly backward. But I understood, maybe for the first time, why we had never quite fit. I wasn't what she was looking for. I never had been. And she wasn't what I needed either. I didn't say any of that. I let the door close. And I started the next chapter alone. The weeks after a breakup have a particular texture. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just wide. Like a calendar that suddenly has no obligations in it. I used that space deliberately. I started getting to the office earlier. Picked back up on a real estate investment project I'd been stalling on with my longtime friend Lance. Rejoined the mentorship program through my firm, where I'd been matched with 2 younger associates who needed someone to tell them the honest version of how the industry worked. I ran more. I slept more. I called my brother for the first time in months. I wasn't rebuilding. I was just living, without managing someone else's comfort alongside my own. Scott checked in once a week. He's been my closest friend since college, the kind of person who doesn't ask how you're doing in a way that requires a performance. He just shows up. We grabbed coffee about 3 weeks after Holly left. He said, "You seem lighter." I thought about that. "I think I was working very hard at something that wasn't working," I said. He nodded. "She needed a prop," he said. "You're not a prop." I didn't argue. 2 months in, the real estate project Lance and I had been developing started moving. We brought in a financial advisor named Wesley, a real estate partner named Parker, and eventually connected with an investor named Sawyer who had been looking for exactly the kind of mid-tier residential development we were proposing. The meetings started running longer. The stakes got real. I had something to build. Around the same time, my firm asked me to represent them at a 2-day regional development conference in the city. The host, a woman named Harper, had been organizing the event for 6 consecutive years and ran it with precision that made other industry events look amateur. I presented on day 1. Nothing flashy. Just the work, the numbers, the logic behind the approach. Afterward, a board member named Natalie introduced herself and said the presentation was one of 3 that had actually held her attention that day. A technology founder named Carter followed up asking about the firm. An industry speaker named Grant asked if I'd be open to a panel the following spring. I collected business cards I hadn't asked for. I didn't photograph any of it. I didn't post about it. I went home that night, made dinner, and went to sleep early because I had a full day the next morning. My business associate Troy called me a week later. Troy has operated in the city a long time and has a read on people that I've come to trust. He said, "You've become interesting to a lot of people recently." I said, "I've just been working." He said, "That's exactly why." I didn't think much of it then. I filed it next to what Dean told me 20 years ago and kept moving. There's a moment in any growth arc where you stop tracking it. You stop asking whether you're further along than before. You stop measuring against where you started. You just exist inside the momentum. I hit that point around month 4. I wasn't thinking about Holly. I wasn't thinking about proving anything. I was thinking about the development proposal, the mentorship sessions, the dinner I was hosting for 6 people who had collectively become my most important professional relationships. I invited Dean, Troy, Lance, Wesley, Parker, and a marketing executive named Abigail who had been instrumental in repositioning the nonprofit I'd been supporting. We sat around the table for 3 hours. It was the kind of dinner that makes you feel like your life is going somewhere real. I heard about Holly secondhand, the way you always do. Stacy, a mutual friend who'd always been more mine than hers, mentioned it carefully over drinks one evening. "She's been asking about you," Stacy said. "Asking what?" Stacy tilted her glass. "She saw something. Maybe a few things. I think the conference was photographed, and one of the industry recaps mentioned you by name. And then she ran into Claire, your old co-worker, who apparently said some things. What kind of things? Stacy looked at me steadily. The kind of things women say when they're trying to make another woman understand what she walked away from. I sat with that for a moment. She also, Stacy continued, found out about the charity gala. The one with Madison. Apparently a few women from their overlapping social circle were there and came back talking about you. I shook my head slowly. Not at Holly. At the irony. I found out later, through Stacy and eventually through Holly's sister Alicia, who had always been honest with me, what the timeline actually looked like from Holly's side. It started with the conference recap. A journalist named Sophia had written a brief industry profile that included a paragraph about emerging voices in mid-tier development. My name was in it. Holly saw it shared by 3 separate people before she connected the dots. Then the gala. Madison's event had done well and generated some social media coverage. Several attendees had posted photos, and I appeared in a few in the background, talking to a group, gesturing at something. Holly's best friend Bethany had apparently been following Madison and saw them. Bethany, who had always been direct, apparently said to Holly, "Isn't that your ex? Why is every woman in this photo leaning toward him?" Holly didn't answer. Alicia called me on a Thursday afternoon. We had always gotten along, even after Holly and I ended things. Alicia had never been one to take sides performatively. She said, "I'm not calling to make things weird. I just wanted to tell you something because I think you deserve to hear it." I said, "Okay." "She gets it now," Alicia said. "Holly, she understands what she said and she understands what she meant by it, and I think she finally understands why it was wrong." I didn't say anything right away. "She's not going to reach out," Alicia continued. "I don't think she knows how, but she asked me to tell you, if I ever talked to you, that she was wrong about what she thought comfort meant." I thought about the rooftop party, about Derek and his expensive watch, about the way Holly had tracked him across the room, about all the invisible moments where she'd measured me against a standard I'd never agreed to. "Tell her I appreciate that," I said. "That's it?" Alicia asked. "That's it," I said. I think about what actually happened in those months sometimes. Not the romance of it. Not the dramatic arc of a man who proved something to a woman who doubted him. That's not what occurred. What occurred was simpler and also more complete. I stopped spending energy managing a relationship that was quietly asking me to be something I wasn't. And in that space, I became more of what I already was. The work got sharper. The friendships got deeper. The vision got clearer. Women noticed. Not because I became flashier. Not because I started commanding rooms the way Derek commanded rooms. But because there's a quality in a man who knows who he is and doesn't need to announce it. People move toward that. They can't always name why. They just know they want to be near it. Holly had believed jealousy was the indicator. That if other women looked at what she had and wanted it, that proved its worth. What she couldn't see, what took losing it to understand, was that those women weren't responding to something she'd overlooked. They were responding to something she'd actively rejected. The steadiness, the reliability, the confidence that doesn't need an audience. The kind of man who makes other women comfortable because he's not trying to manipulate the temperature of the room. The kind of man who makes other women feel safe in conversation because he's not performing. She had called that comfortable like it was a failure. They recognized it as something rare. My friend Lance got engaged 6 months after Holly and I ended. I was one of 3 people he told before he proposed. He said, "I need you there when I ask her. Not at the moment, but after. I need your face to be one of the first faces I see." I was there. His fiancée cried. Lance cried, which he would deny afterward, but was clearly true. I didn't cry, but something in my chest moved in the way it does when you witness a thing that was always supposed to happen finally happening. On the way home, I thought about what I wanted. Not as a response to Holly. Not as proof of anything. Just as an honest accounting of my own life. I wanted what Lance had. Not the proposal. Not the spectacle. The certainty. Someone who looked at me and didn't need me to be louder to know what they had. A few months after Alicia called, I met someone. I won't detail it here because it's still early and it belongs to us, not to this story. What I'll say is that she laughed on our first evening together in a way that had nothing to do with how she looked while laughing. She wasn't performing. Neither.